What's the fastest you've seen a crowd go from excited to horrified? An animal show at Busch Gardens. The camels started ducking. Also at Busch Gardens, years ago, elephant took a gigantic loud cheers. I mean a monumental brap. Goats ran over at warp speed and began feasting on it. The crowd was so appalled. It was wonderful. So much better than watching the goats form a pyramid. I'm giggling thinking about the poor young girl MC attempting not to retch as the goat handlers tried to interrupt their cheers party. Edit. I've been given the goat award. My life is full. But apparently not as full as the goats. The entire EMBL students from the elementary school where teacher/astronaut Krista McAuliffe taught at, who were broadcast, lived to the world as they watched the Space Shuttle Challenge explode seconds after takeoff, killing all hands on board, including their teacher. Oh yeah, we had an all-school EMBL to watch it, on a tiny TV up on the auditorium stage of course. I was in 3rd grade, we barely understood what was going on. The most unnerving thing was watching our teachers weeping quietly and trying to look strong for us. The climax of the last Twilight movie is a fight scene that goes on for 10 minutes. Vampires are ripping each other's heads off, giant wolves are throwing them around like chew toys, and one by one each of Bella's friends and family die around her. You can actually hear people in the audience react as each named character dies. And none of this happened in the book, which was criticized for its lack of climax. As each minute goes on, it feels like they improved the film's story to give it a real sense of danger and excitement and payoff to the series. So cheers is intense. And right as they kill the big bad evil guy, the camera fades to black, pulls out, and reveals that all of it was a vision. The last 10 minutes didn't happen. It was someone seeing a future that might happen. No one died. Just a bunch of vampires and wolves standing around staring at each other in silence. Then they all walk away, alive and well. The crowd groans. A girl up front shouts, "Are you chisting me?" Everyone sits back in their seat. No one cares about what's happening on screen anymore. Some people are laughing because someone hit the undo button on the most exciting 10 minutes of the movie. Never have I seen a theater turn on a film so quickly and so hard. I was at one of the midnight premieres for this one and saw the same thing. Several different people yelled "what the duck" when it showed it was all just a vision, and you could feel the disappointment in the crowd. Pink Floyd often would have giant floating pigs released during the concert. You know, inflatable balloons. This would happen like halfway through the show. Well, people are smoking tons of pot, drinking, doing God knows what other drugs, so by the time the pig is released it's basically like God descending from the heavens. People were losing their chiz at the pig. Well, it got caught in one of the wires and caught on fire. You've never seen so many stoners fall to their knees in terror/fear/sorrow over the death of a giant inflatable pig. There is no God anymore. His bacon got fried. I think this is the only one in this thread where I wish I was in that crowd. There was a guy performing risky stunt dives in a river for money. He pulled off great stuff and people were clapping and clearly hyped. One of the tricks went really bad and he crashed headfirst into a rock from a decent height and killed himself. I always remember what Panjulit said at the end of his male gun routine. It was like, "We find it morally wrong to put someone in real danger for entertainment." And I have to agree. A friend of mine decided it would be fun to try and see if he could smash a beer glass on his head. Up until then he was just being an enthusiastic drunk and had some positive attention. He then decided the beer glassing was a good idea and promptly executed it. Head wounds bleed a lot in the first minute. Crowd went for more. "You're cute, Fuwaki's gonna die." I sobered up in an instant and got a semi-clean towel for him to stop the bleeding. Thankfully head wounds also stop bleeding pretty quick in most instances. Drunk ideas are almost never good ideas. WWE's Over the Edge 1999. Owen Hart fell 70 feet to his death during the event, and the company inexplicably continued on with the show after he'd been taken to a hospital. That's kind of ducked up. I saw this on YouTube somewhere. A bodybuilder was strutting his stuff in front of a crowd, warming them up and everything at an event. They absolutely loved it. Many people had attended just to see him. He was at his peak. Huge muscles and sculpted physique. Absolutely amazing. I don't personally like the bodybuilding look, but you've got to respect hard work. The crowd was cheering him and he got so pumped up, so full of energy and emotion that instead of just walking onto the stage he did an impromptu jump flip. He launched himself high into the air and did this impressive flip. The crowd went berserk. But he was a bodybuilder, not a gymnast. He landed on his neck and died instantly, crumpling on the spot. It is one of the most horrific, sudden and unexpected things I've ever seen. Maybe the worst part was not all of the crowd realized immediately. They kept smiling and cheering for their hero for another minute before it sank, in that they had just witnessed him die right in front of them, and they were clapping for a dead man. Edit. His name was Sifizol Angelo Thabit, only 23 years old, from South Africa. He was a junior world champion in his weight category. For those who are asking, a few people in the comments have posted the link. It's here. I very much do not recommend watching. It's tragic and horrible. Obviously NSFW/NSFL for death. Similar to how comedian/magician Tommy Cooper died. He was known for being the guy whose tricks went wrong, and he just kind of muddled through it for a bit, but it always worked in the end. One day he's doing a live staged show, and he had a heart attack, collapsed and died instantly. The audience all just thought it was part of his act, and started clapping and laughing until someone realized what had happened and closed the curtains. 7 to 8 years ago during a concert there was an earthquake, not too huge, but enough for some speakers to fall, and to scare the chiz out of those attending. At a music festival, Bluesfest, in my city, Ottawa, we had a stage collapse in a windstorm a few years back. It was actually 9 years ago. The band playing at the time was Cheap Trick, and they sued the festival and the stage company. Some details. An American comedian in the Republic of Ireland saying how happy he was to be in the United Kingdom. Similarly, a Canadian band hollering "We love England" at the beginning of their set in Glasgow. Monday Night Football, November 18th, 1985. Washington Redskins vs. the New York Giants. I was pretty young at the time, so being allowed to stay up late on a weekday was a rare occasion. During one of the plays, Joe Theismann was sacked by Lawrence Taylor and Harry Carson of the Giants. The entire stadium went silent as Theismann would end up suffering a compound fracture of the tibia and fibula. What I remember most vividly is that the broadcast kept replaying it over and over again, and seeing Shin snap at a 90-degree angle. It made me physically nauseous and had to walk out of the room. If I recall correctly, following the injury, broadcasting policies were changed so that constant replays like this would not be shown in the future. Surprised to see how memorable this was for others as well. As a budding Redskins fan at the time, I gained a huge amount of respect for Lawrence Taylor that day. I understand that injuries are a part of all sports. It's a level of risk that many are willing to take. It was a need to keep replaying it over and over again from every imaginable angle that made the impression. Thank you all for sharing your similar experiences. Seeing Alex Smith's leg injury relive was just as bad. I literally screamed in horror when that happened. I was at some weird zoo/animal preserve north of Phoenix in 2012, and there was a tigress in chain-linked compound. This little girl went up to her and blew her a kiss. The tigress looked at her and licked her own, not the little girl's, whiskers, and the crowd went all wild. The tigress shifted a little bit and pissed all over the little girl. The crowd was shocked and horrified, but I laughed my ear off. While I was reading this I was so scared it was gonna say she was mauled by the tiger. During a Buffalo Sabres game, Clint Malarkuk took an ice skate to the neck, severing his carotid artery and partially cutting his jugular vein. He almost bled out on the ice. The sight was so horrifying 2 fans had heart attacks and 11 others fainted. Numerous fans vomited at the sight of all the blood. Malarkuk thought he was going to die on the ice, so his only thought was getting off the ice, so his mom didn't have to watch him die on TV. He asked for a priest and had the equipment manager call his mom to tell her he loved her. The only reason he didn't die is a Sabres athletic trainer was a combat medic in Vietnam. My parents were at the game and said that most of the fans mourned the worst and that seeing the ice turn red was one of the more horrifying things they'd seen in person. I highly recommend reading his Players Tribune article that recounts the entire experience and life afterwards. I don't know if this counts, but I'm a huge fan of 90s rock. con, slipknot, Seether, mushroom head, etc. Anyways, I've always wanted to see Marilyn Manson in concert, and he was opening for I think one of the mentioned bands above a few years back. Anyways, he comes on and just looked horrible, kind of slurring, but whatever, I get it. So like 4 songs in he starts singing Beautiful People and mostly everyone seemed into it. Well, maybe BCHTX, and it was an outdoor venue over 100 degrees, but he just goes, "Duck it, you'll suck," and walks off stage. Took a few seconds to register with everyone he wasn't joking, and every starts booing and cussing. I was legit excited and it just turned to garbage so quick. Edit. Thanks for the guild. Funny enough, I had a similar experience with Manson at a festival. He slurred his way through about 2 songs while falling all over the stage before he just wandered off and never came back. As it was a festival, we had another act to go, so people weren't too upset. But it was very strange. I was at a Van Halen concert a few years back, and David Lee Roth comes on the mic and says this next one is from our new album. I was at a Rolling Stones concert about 15 years ago. As soon as Mick said that Keith was going to do a song, everybody suddenly had to go to the bathroom. We were all 17 to 18 on a school trip. Typical week away doing rock climbing, archery, camping, etc. At the end of the trip we're gathered in a big hall for one final gathering, and then out of the blue there was a demonstration on how to effectively kill a chicken, using a live chicken that was killed in front of us all for some reason. No warning. So it was a fun week at the KFC training camp, which ended in a game of chicken. Several years back, and my band opens up for a hardcore punk outfit from Illinois at an all-ages venue, where they have a sci-fi theme to their show. The singer dresses up as a mad scientist and the other 3 members dress up as his evil robots. They also have old television sets plugged in around the stage playing 1950s B horror movies while they play. No one, including the people running the venue, have ever seen these guys play before, but going off of the theme we are expecting something awesome. That is until I'm backstage putting my equipment away and notice them all pounding back shots of tequila. When it's their turn to play, they are so hammered they can't even make it through one verse of a song. The singer ended up drop kicking one of the TVS into the crowd of about 200 people, which caught fire. This caused the sound guy to end their set right there, and they were banned from the venue for life. I've never seen a crowd go from happy to ouches so fast. One of my buddies saw the Stooges in the 1970s. The band started the show playing raw power with no vocals for about 10 straight minutes. Then Iggy finally stumbled out. He made it through about 3 songs before he just fell the duck over, and that was it. The show was done. Diablo Immortal announcement. I mean, don't you guys own phones? At my friend's wedding the groom kicked the flower boy. He was no more than 10, so yeah. On purpose? Last week at a BLM protest they were letting anyone come up and speak through a megaphone. This man got up and started talking about his newborn son and how he wanted to make sure we have a better world for him. He then started talking about love and unity, and the guy essentially had the crowd eating out of the palm of his hand. Then he brought up Bill Cosby and how he was arrested on allegations, and the crowd turned instantly. I remember watching a Twitter video Snoop Dogg posted where he defended Bill Cosby's innocence and talked it up as some type of racist conspiracy. I've sorta soured on the guy since then. Didn't help that he also referred to Gayle King as a doghead bitch in the same video. I, along with an entire beachfront of about 80 plus people, watched a boat back up and chop a lady up into pieces. It was bad. What the duck? This is the most recent example that comes to mind. Reddit. Okay, I was kind of afraid to watch this video. It's actually really funny. For anyone who doesn't want to see or can't hear, basically the guy screams about how everyone needs to practice love and how every individual religion is equal. People are cheering. Then suddenly he shouts NRS come in every color, and the audience just quiets down. He shouts it again to make sure they heard it. You hear some chick just go, "What? Lol." Detroit Tigers almost perfect game. We all saw the play and the dude was out. We all start celebrating. Then we slowly realize the ump called him safe. Celebration quickly turned to the opposite. Technically not horrified, but still the fastest 180 I've seen or been a part of. Detroit sports and officials turning a moment of elation into a moment of sadness in an instant. Name a more iconic duo. I was at a 4th of July fireworks show in Fort Walton, Destin, Florida. The show was being staged from the inlet from the Gulf of Mexico to the bay. People were watching it from the other side of the inlet, the Highway 98 bridge, and from their boats on the water. The first salvo launched, but one of the shells exploded either in the launch tube or just above, and ignited the rest of the show on the ground. Some launched a little bit before exploding. What was supposed to be a 30 to 40 minute show lasted 1 to 2 minutes. As the first shells blew up, I could see the silhouette of the technicians as they ran, like a stop motion movie. The technicians were cool as hell, since none of them were looking back at the explosions. I never realized how big the bursts were until I saw them going off on the ground. Everybody was trying to get away. We were being hit by pieces of fireworks. They weren't just landing on everybody, they were hitting us. My dad started the boat, but realized we couldn't move. A lot of kids were watching the show while they floated in the water. We were yelling at the other boats to stop because of the kids in the water. Fortunately, enough people heard/listened or realized what the problem now was that they stopped and locked everybody in place. Nobody was seriously hurt or killed, only a few techs were treated for minor burns. On that day, those techs outran Usain Bolt on the beach, wearing safety gear. The technicians were cool as hell, since none of them were looking back at the explosions. I just about lost it here. You have a way with making a disaster story funny. Budweiser's press conference that turned into a filmed suicide. We had a local TV anchor in Florida named Christine Chubbuck say, in keeping with Channel 40's policy of bringing you the latest in blood and guts and in living color, you are going to see another first, an attempted suicide, and shoot herself in the head. Circa 1974. The footage never got out, so it's not well known. I wasn't present, but the Sugarland stage collapse must have been up there. Yowto. Sudden event accidents and attacks seem like a nightmare. Just a few to think of. The station fire at a Great White concert. 100 dead. Le Bataclan attack at an Eagles of Death metal concert. 90 dead. Vegas shooting during Jason Aldean concert. 58 dead. Columbus nightclub shooting at a Imagaplan concert. 5 dead including Dimebag Darrell, 1955 Le Mans disaster. 84 dead Ramstein Air Show. 70 dead. Really makes you realize how fragile life is. 1 second you're having fun, and before you can even process what's going on, you're dead. Edit. I put a link to the show on YouTube at the bottom if you want to watch. Don't read the end. There was a Darren Brown show called Remote Control. It was all about the effects of mob mentality. The crowd had to decide whether something nice happened or something bad happened to the same person. Each time the thing would be better or worse than the last. Eventually it led to them deciding that he would be kidnapped. They were all watching, live on hidden cameras in a studio, by the way. When the kidnapping was attempted, it showed him evading them, but running into the road and getting hit by a car. The whole crowd gasped, and eventually people asked the filming to stop. The last part was just an actor/stuntman though. Edit. Found it on YouTube too. Thanks to you/Slakerwiker for the timestamp. Just to add, everyone in the crowd wore masks, and the idea is that when people are anonymous and concealed, they tend to make some morally questionable decisions, or follow the rest of the anonymous audience members in an example of mob mentality. The show itself ducking sucked the old mayo. They gave compensation to the poor bloke they were torturing after all that. When working on a kids show, a child goes missing within the first 15 minutes of the show starting. Show had an emergency stop, so the parents could plead for the child to make himself known. Nobody was allowed to leave their seats or leave the building. Whole building had to be searched. Everyone mourned the worse, but after half an hour they resumed the show, even though the kid still had not been found. 10 minutes later we got word that the kid had wandered out of the building and was found safe and sound around the corner. To make matters worse, the show was Rapunzel. You know, where the story centers around a kidnapped child. Rapunzel. You know, where the story centers around a kidnapped child. Hey now. They made a fair trade. Woodstock 99. Everyone was super cool and chill, and all of a sudden it felt like the winds shifted. It was palpable, like you could cut the air, it was so heavy. Got a super bad vibe, so we packed up immediately and left. By the time we got to the first gas station, reports of fire and rioting started. I wonder why we get those feelings like that. Like we get feelings where we can tell something is wrong or something bad's gonna happen. The station nightclub fire. Small packed club. Great White was playing with unauthorized pyrotechnics. Suddenly caught the building on fire. Emergency exits were locked and people jammed the exit door. 100 died. Thankfully didn't see it in person, but there is a YouTube video showing the whole thing. It is a very traumatic watch though, so wouldn't really watch it unless you want it imprinted strong enough in your brain so that you will always look for exits when going into a crowded area for the rest of your life. Almost everyone in Rhode Island knew someone in that fire by a degree of separation or two. My sister noticed a casual friend from her spin class was missing for a long time. Months later she came back to class and my sister asked, "Hey, where have you been?" She had been in the fire and luckily escaped with only some lung damage from smoke inhalation. That fire is the reason I always know 2 exits from public places now. Challenger launch. This is a good one because the eyes of the whole country witnessed this. According to the wiki article, 17% of all Americans watched it happen live, and a study reported that 85% of Americans had heard the news within 1 hour of the explosion, in an age before cell phones/internet. So many school children were watching to celebrate Macaulay's journey to space, only to be stunned in silence. Election night 2016. I remember staying up late that night with my wife watching it all unfold. Seemed like it was just dragging on, because after a certain point it was hours without a single update. Finally my wife and I decided to go to bed, and as we were about to shut the TV off they announced Trump won. From that point forward, watching everyone's reaction in the flat-topped building the Clintons rented out was crazy different. Darren Brown. Remote-controlled Darren Brown is a TV magician, illusionist, sort of like a Penn and Teller of psychics, and this show is on Mob Mentality. He has an audience pranker man, Chris, who has consented to be messed with for a Darren Brown show at an unknown date. There is a studio audience watching and voting on whether he gets a good prank or bad prank, with hidden cameras tracking him and Chris's friends and family luring him to certain areas where pranks can happen. The pranks start out silly, but he's the lucky customer at a shop, but he's accused of shoplifting. The pranks slowly get more and more extreme and the audience are voting the bad pranks all the time, laughing as Chris's life is slowly falling apart in one day. It ends with Chris being let out of a police car near his house and the audience have voted for a scary black van to pull up and kidnap Chris. As the van pulls up, Chris runs away and the men chase him down. But when he turns the corner a car comes and knocks Chris down. The studio goes quiet, the lights go on and Darren says nothing, letting the audience take in what happened, giving them nothing. After a while, Darren explains that this was all set up, and Chris was in on the whole thing and the audience were the ones being tested, explaining how being part of a crowd can make someone lose their morality. They were just cheering a man having his life ruined, and being kidnapped fearing for his life. Thank you for this. I think it is incredibly educational at this time in the history of our lives. I was brought to corrida once, and the matador got his leg impaled by the bull while he was trying to get over a fence. The crowd started screaming and booing the bull like it was a foul move. I was like, Mayo the Jew ducking stabbed it. What was it supposed to do? Recite poetry? The bull must have been so disappointed to have the crowd turn on him in the middle of his long, slow, agonizing slaughter. I was at a Russell Peters stand-up show in a large theater. He starts some banter with the guy in the first row, who had a huge tattoo on his arm saying Skylar or similar name. He asks all about Skylar. It's the guy's daughter. He starts making jokes about daughters, some sexual innuendos etc. and then asks how old Skylar is. The guy in the audience goes, she passed away. It was pure crickets after that. Reminds me of this video. Go to about 18 seconds. Comedian does some crowd work, asking about the messed up families of audience members. One lady he asks says that her mom left her dad, who then murdered her, and the comic has this brief blank stare of disbelief/panic that is amazing. To his credit, the comic did as well as could be expected with such a dark bombshell being dropped in his lap. He eventually ended up making it pretty funny, but wow. Went to see the Pokemon movie with my fellow group home residents as a treat. There were maybe 70 of us there. Most had never been to a movie theater before, so it was a pretty big deal. The house even splurged to get everyone a small soda, candy, and a portion of popcorn. This was literally the best day of most of our lives so far. We get settled in, taking up most of the theater when the credits started and the lights dimmed. We were so excited. Pokemon, the movie, was about to freaking start. Opening ads start. We are silent the whole time in anticipation. Then the credits never ended, we thought, because this one ad seemed to go on forever. Some kind of a spoof of an alien movie, maybe a play on Star Trek. Credits rolled. Lights turned on. Nobody spoke. Every single face was deflated and so freaking disappointed. Someone screwed up and played Galaxy Quest instead of the brand new at the time Pokemon movie. Nobody talked the whole way back to the house, but as soon as we got there, so many kids lost it. I didn't end up seeing it until like 10 years later, and it blew mind. Haha. You guys watched a whole other wrong movie at the theater? Harley Davidson 100th anniversary party. For months they said the headliner of the big weekend-long party was a mystery guest. Everyone assumed it would be someone who appeals to the Harley crowd like the Rolling Stones or Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, right? So the show starts. Opening act is the Doobie Brothers and the crowd loved it. Next is Tim McGraw and the crowd loved it. Next was Kid Rock and he just rocks and the crowd loves it. Then it's time for the mystery guest. It's Elton Ducking John. The crowd just poured out of the park. Plenty stayed and enjoyed the show, but tens of thousands of people said duck this and left. Link to story. My friend was at that show, and he was stoked that he went from being towards the back to being able to relatively easily walk up and get near the front for an Elton Ducking John concert. Probably the Las Vegas shooting. That whole video was ducked up and eye-opening, especially seeing the woman on the ground with her eyes open dead. Edit. Last time I saw it, it was on LiveLeak. I don't have the link offhand. Was working as a backstage manager in a medium-sized concert venue. We had quite a famous band with a crazy singer that used weird props. On their rider, a list bands give to venues with their wishes. They demanded we arrange 2 buckets of pig blood. Of course we did not do this. Show was going well, people were having a good time, until the singer took out a steak knife he stole from our restaurant and started slicing his arms open. He was really making deep cuts, and it was horrifying to watch. Blood was everywhere. Most people in the audience were shocked, some were dry heaving. When the show was over the singer was dripping blood all over the backstage area, smearing it on the walls. I was fairly young and scheduled to work alone that night, so I was way in over my head. I tried to reason with him, but at that point he was very intoxicated, and there was no point talking to him. Our backstage area looked like someone was murdered there. When I tried talking to their stage manager he shut me up very quickly. He was probably sick of dealing with venue staff complaining about the singer. He did this chiz all the time. The band was notorious regarding these kinds of crazy acts. I had to put up with a lot of chiz working as a backstage manager. Bands wrecking the backstage rooms, making a mess everywhere, being sexist, being too ducked up to stand on their feet, you name it, but covering the whole stage and backstage with their blood. That was a first. We had to repaint the whole area because there is no point trying to clean the blood smears. Fairly shortly after I changed careers because I could not deal with that anymore. Was this mayhem? Deleted. This is horrifying. I'm so sorry. Stories like this make me worry about how many other preventable deaths there have been from similar drug overdose experiences. My boyfriend was telling me once that drug education in the Netherlands, where he's from, in English, mostly involves teaching people how to take drugs safely and what to do if you're or someone else is overdosing. Which sounds like it could save a lot more lives than the kind of drug education I received, which was basically, if you take drugs even just once, you will die, but if you don't die, your life will be ruined. When Bilbo Baggins disappeared at the end of the speech he gave at his 111th birthday party. I was at a Bo Burnham show he was recording for his Netflix special, but unfortunately this part didn't make the cut. He was cracking jokes as usual, then asked everyone in the audience to crack their knuckles on the count of 3. It was the most horrifying evil sound any of us had ever heard. Duck, that gave me a good belly laugh. Wish it had made the final cut. I was at a sporting event where someone proposed to their girlfriend in the crowd, and they put it on the jumbotron. They panned the camera to the woman, with the man's outstretched arm holding a ring. She's beaming as she realizes what's happening, and the crowd roars in a joyful applause. They then pan the camera down to the husband-to-be, who turns to face the camera. I'm sorry, there is no other way to say this, he was very ugly. Over the span of about 5 seconds, the joyful hooting and hollering turns into one gigantic 15,000 person sound. It was agonizing. In my recollection of the event, the ugh sound transformed back into good for you, hooting and hollering, but that might just be my memory trying to downplay the cringe factor. Oh man, I was ready for the no, but I didn't expect that. That makes me sad. May 4th 2010. It's de Denderdenking in the Netherlands, where we remember all deaths of people that died through or because of war or peaceful operations. It was called to life after WWII. At 8 o'clock, I think, we have a 2-minute silence for remembrance. One person however thought it was fun to scream bomb by something alike, rendering all the people there terrified and running against the barricades in a hurry to get away. The king and queen got escorted away as soon as this happened. Here is a video about the event. Yowto. Ariana Grande's concert at Manchester Arena on the 22nd May 2017. Even still now, this event really emotionally gets me. Those poor kids. It always hits me especially hard that it was nearly all kids. All terrorists are scumbags, but it takes a special kind of scumbag to target children. One of the kids murdered was 8 years ago. I was at a company holiday party where they rented a live karaoke band for the event. I looked through their song list to see what they had. I noticed the Misfits' Last Caress on there, which was a song I loved, but seemed so out of place. For those of you that don't know the song, it starts out with, I got something to say, I killed your baby today, and it doesn't matter much to me, as long as it's dead. I thought, man, I kind of want to do that song, but I really shouldn't. But after many drinks later, I was drunk enough to not care. I get up on stage and request the song. The band starts going, and I get super into it, just belting the lyrics into the microphone. Now, it wasn't the ducked up lyrics that got to people. I'm not even sure they had any idea what I was singing, because they were cheering me on. What shocked them was when I accidentally lifted the microphone too fast to my face and smacked myself on the mouth. My lips started bleeding badly, and I could see people in the crowd go from "Who" to "OMG." A co-worker of mine rushed on stage, pulled me aside, and called me a cab home. I have a fun little memento from that night too, because the next day I still showed up on time, which surprised everyone. Because of that, I won this award for being the drunkest at the party and still showing up the next day. Funny considering I killed your baby today might not be the worst lyrical line from that song to sing in front of your coworkers too. There was a episode of The Man Show where they went to Mardi Gras and had a girl to show her boobs. However, they also gave her very hairy boobs to fake out the crowd. The cheering on for her to show her boobs, then the gasp as they saw how hairy she was. It took less than a second. Hard to get a clip to show, but I can't find any that were free. Okay, that's stuck in funny. St. Patrick's Day 2012. During a soccer game between Tottenham Hotspur and Bolton Wanderers, a player, Fabrice Muamba, collapsed on the pitch due to cardiac arrest. The game was televised, and I was watching it at my local pub. The pub became eerily silent. There was a weird sense of things not being good, and everyone was concerned for a player we barely knew of. Football fans might be loud ruffians, but there's a lot of respect when things go wrong. Fortunately, Fabrice survived and recovered, however he retired on doctor's advice. He was lucky that a cardiologist was as a supporter, if I recall correctly. He rushed to a pitch and took care of everything. Other footballers in such cases didn't survive. Puta, Feha, Jane Vivinfo. There's a brilliant clip of Van Halen playing, or attempting to play Jump. It starts off with an extended synth intro that lasts nearly a minute before the familiar intro comes in. The build up is intense and the crowd are loving it. Then the guitars come in, and oh no, oh god no, Turns out the synth that's been soloing all that time was out of tune. Nobody realized until the other instruments came in. The comic timing coupled with the cheesy drama of the song make it a perfect comedy moment worthy of anything from This Is Spinal Tap. Here's the clip. Edit. Jump on the album is in C major. The keyboard in the clip somehow went out as C ash major. Again, probably the most comedic interval to be out by. Probably the keyboard player forgot to turn off the transpose feature. A classic blunder for a novice. Funny to see out with such a big name and crowd. Lol. Teacher, we're watching a movie today, but you have to take notes. Or before leaving for a field trip you're handed a piece of paper with a chisload of questions to answer while on the field trip. Not quite horrified, but cheering to booing back to cheering in a matter of 5 minutes. I was at a music festival and a mid-tier headliner came on about 15 minutes early. Halfway through his first song, they pulled the plug on he and he is ushered off stage. Then some lady comes on stage to talk about sponsors. The entire crowd starts booing, and she walks off the stage mid-sentence. The DJ comes back on a minimum later and says, "Duck, I've never had that happen before." And the entire crowd erupts. Why'd they pull the plug on the guy? So, this is gonna require some context. This was a little while ago, back while I was in high school. The school loved to bring in speakers, which in retrospect, was very kind of them, though many people thought it was a waste of time. On this particular day, the speaker was a decently famous poet, who I will not name for what I hope are obvious reasons. The talk was actually going pretty well, since she turned out to be very funny, and was cracking jokes, and going on long, entertaining tangents. It was close to the most engaged I'd seen the school. Then, she decided to go a more serious direction, suicide. She went on a several-minute tangent about how suicide is selfish, that culminated in the fabulously awful quote, "People are like, oh, my life is so hard," and then just give up. How dare they? The entire room had gone ducking silent, because there was one thing she didn't know, the school had just had a suicide that had rocked the entire community. Completely ruined the talk and the school was apologizing for days. Edit. A bunch of people are asking me to name her, and while I agree with their anger, it doesn't feel appropriate to me. She did something awful, but given how messy internet mobs can get, I don't really want to start one. Sorry all. Of course you shouldn't name her. What I don't get is why the school apologized for what she said. I'm guessing they were like, sorry we brought her here, but they couldn't have expected her to say that. She should have been the one apologizing to the whole school community. When a horse goes down hard at the races, although it splits the crowd, the compassionate ones go to horrified. The incompassionate ones with money on another horse don't give a duck. I was at the Kai Derby the year 8 Bells ran with the boys. I had placed a bet for her to show, and was so excited when she came in second. From where I was, I could see the finish, but the crowd was quiet. Horrified when she was euthanized on the track. I don't think I cashed in my winning ticket. 1996 Olympics bombing in Atlanta, my hometown. The Pulse nightclub shooting. I remember being awake at 3 AM and seeing that come on the news. It was absolutely heartbreaking. I live in Orlando, down the street from Pulse, and I was out that night. That following morning was the actual worst day of my life. Rushing to get in contact with friends who wouldn't answer their phones. This month will be 4 years. My heart breaks every day when I have to drive past the scene. When I was a kid we went to a baseball game in this small town. It was the beginning of the season, so they had the idea to have 2 guys parachuted in the middle of the field. First guy, everything went perfect. Other guy flew over the small field, a gust of wind made him lost control, and he just went away, too far for anyone to see him land. Parents were horrified, kids were crying. We all thought he crashed and died. Maybe 15 minutes later we found out that he was okay. He landed in a parking lot nearby. The organization never did that again. I've told this before but here we go. My cousin, a few friends and I went to the first screening of Endgame. It was a double bill, so we sat in the theater watching both Infinity War and Endgame with a brief intermission. The atmosphere in that movie was like being at a football UK match with the crowd going wild. We get to the end of the film, Thanos snaps and nothing, the room fell silent. The camera turns to show Iron Man and the stones forming onto his hand. Everyone goes crazy screaming as Iron Man says his line and snaps his fingers. The screen goes white and everyone stands up and holds their breath ready to scream in excitement for whatever is about to happen. During this silence, my cousin, sat next to me, has a realization and a thought pops into his head, only in his sleep. Deprived excitement, it's not in his head, it comes out his mouth and very loudly he says, "Oh God has dead, isn't he?" The suspense in the room died in an instant, and I heard someone at the back of the theater say, "She's has right, isn't he?" The woman 2 seats to my left started sobbing, and then slowly people start sitting down around the theater. Oh damn, that's actually pretty funny. 10 years ago or so, I was watching fireworks for 4th of July with family and friends. You know how the show usually ends with a bunch of fireworks going off at once? Well, that seemed to be what was happening, so people were cheering. One of my friends suddenly gets up, turns to us and says, "Something's wrong. We need to move." I had no idea what he was talking about, but in that moment, I noticed that one of those big bull fireworks had gone oof near the ground, showing only a fraction of the ball. Literally a second later, fireworks were shot into the crowd. It's not like movies. There was no screaming or fleeing for our lives. Everyone just froze. Only 2 fireworks exploded in the crowd. At that point the fireworks were spent, and there was just a deadly silence. Only one of the fireworks hurt anyone. It was one of the ones that are small but really loud. I think a mom and her son were hurt. But even as EMTs rushed to treat them, the silence still hung over the crowd. Very slowly, people started to walk out of the park somberly. I watched the singer of a band call out somebody for sitting down during the show, and tried forcing them to stand up. It was the disabled section. Exhumed concert. People were going nuts during their set until one of the band members started puking on stage. Apparently he can do it on demand. I don't know of Exhumed or what their genre is, but puking on command sounds freaking metal. I went to a Lauryn Hill concert with my friends and girlfriend when I was about 17. The show was great and everyone was enjoying themselves. Then she stopped and was talking to some members of the audience. She singled out an interracial couple in the front row and shamed them in front of the entire concert. Made a point to say just how wrong it was. My best friend was black and was there with his white girlfriend. Things got really uncomfortable after that, and I never really listened to Lauryn Hill anymore after that. Wow, that's really ducked up. A bit more lighthearted, but when Brock Lesnar pinned Undertaker at WrestleMania to break the 21-0 streak. The moment the ref's hand hit 3, you can just hear a pin drop in an 80k full stadium. Best moment ever. Reddit, in general wrestling, is full of moments like this. From wet fart debuts to Daniel Bryan being eliminated from the Royal Rumble that one year. Tragic ones as well. Vice has a great documentary on Owen Hart and the fall that took his life. Jim Ross recalls the story of how one of the main producers of the show, Kevin Dunn, told him /Owen's dead. And we are live in 9, 8, 7. Roman Reigns coming out at number 30 in the Rumble a few years back. Don't think I've ever heard that sheer unadulterated pure disappointment before. The performance of gymnast Samantha C. Rio when she landed awkwardly at the end of a flip during a floor routine. Ended up dislocating both knees, broke one leg, and tore multiple ligaments. Video of injury happens within the first 10-15 seconds. I have regretted every link I've clicked on in this thread. Congratulations, I think this is the one that makes me finally walk away. When I was 10 and in a restaurant in Disneyland Paris, some of the Disney characters had come to visit the restaurant and everyone was excited to see them, and they walked around the tables having pictures with people. Mickey Mouse got the most attention because he's Mickey Mouse, but then as he was walking he accidentally kicked a toddler who was crawling on the floor. Shock and silence while the child cried and Mickey tried to comfort it. The child was fine, so everyone forgot about it a few minutes later, but that was some mood whiplash. Personally, I blame the parents for allowing their child to crawl on the floor of a crowded restaurant, since that is unhygienic and potentially dangerous given that everyone was getting tunnel vision for the characters and likely would not have noticed the child in their path. Mickey certainly didn't. Last year's Bethesda conference was pretty bad. Was that the one with the band? My god, that was cringy. There was a video on it that showed the crowd reaction, and one guy had shades and headphones on and his face was hilarious. I was at a music festival in the UK where US rapper Watsky was performing. He started to climb the rigging to the side of the stage and next thing he is about 40 feet up above the crowd singing and dancing. Everyone is going crazy. I remember turning to my friend and saying, "He's surely not going to jump from there, is he? Because at a lot of his gigs he will do just that, albeit from a lot smaller heights." Next thing the crazy dastard leaps into the crowd with little to no warning, plummets to the concrete floor and hits a couple of people. Instantly the security and show staff shut everything down. Looked like he was dead, and he injured a couple of people, but everyone survived. When Beck stopped a solo show in Utrecht, because the Dutch fans would not stop talking and kept walking up to give him demo CDs, he just walked off stage and said "duck you" after playing 30 seconds of Loser. Mad respect. Dutch people in concerts are the ducking worst. You can barely hear the music over them talking about their duckwit jobs and stuff. To the Dutch people reading this, shut the duck up during a concert. We are there to hear the music, not about how you and Marge bought a ducking house. I'm so confused by this. Do the Dutch really have bad concert manners? When the Maple Leafs blew a 4-1 lead in the final 10 minutes of Game 7 in 2013, after the tying goal, the camera switched to the crowd of Toronto fans outside their arena, where they had been rage-face partying all night, and it was just sheer silence. A girl odd at a festival in the middle of a headliner show. The crowd around immediately stopped dancing and turned all their phones' flashlights on and cleared a path for the medics. It was scary. Philadelphia July 4th fireworks show in a public park downtown. I think 2013. We are all in a field on blankets watching fireworks when we see in the distance a wall of people running at us. Someone yells "they're shooting guns," and suddenly it's everyone running. Turned out to be a false alarm, I think. Very surreal to be a part of a mob like that. That time Kendrick pulled a white chick out of the audience to sing "Mad City" and she dropped the N-bomb. I like Kendrick, but that was a trasher move on his part. The premiere of the trailer for Devil 2010 at San Diego Comic-Con. It was at the annual Trailer Park panel where they just show trailers for upcoming movies for an hour or so. It's Hall H, the biggest at the con, and it's packed. The trailer plays, people are invested, you could hear a pin drop. Then the words display on screen from the mind of M. Night Shyamalan. Immediate uniform disappointed awe from 2,000 people. Then everyone cracked up, because we all felt the exact same way. I don't know that horrified is the right word necessarily, but still. Man, I remember the name M. Night Shyamalan being like anti-Viagra from about 2010 to 2015. There's your enthusiasm. And it's gone. Good to see he was able to rehabilitate his image. Owen Hart. Over the Edge 99. Long story short, during a popular wrestler's in trance he fell from the ceiling of the area and basically died on impact. Crowd literally went from cheering to gasps. Worst part is Owen was / is loved by pretty much everybody. A couple years back I was in the crowd at the Schlitterbahn water park in Kansas City when the little boy died on the Viaduct water slide. My wife and I had literally just gotten off that water slide and were heading back to the benches where we had our stuff stored when the slides would go down and then come up the hill to slow down. They had a specific pitch / sound they made, but one of the times that the slide was coming up the hill you could hear a whoosh that sounded a little bit different than the other times. I look up at this point and walking down the path we were right next to where the uphill section was, see the slide bump against the net tunnel up top that was supposed to keep the slides on the track, and see this kid flying off the slide about 10 to 15 feet above the track. He lands at the bottom of the track and slides a few feet, but the sides of the track were too high to be able to see if he's moving, though we could see quite a bit of blood on the track from where he landed, and it didn't look good. Lifeguard runs over to the slide, along with a couple of bystanders that hop the rope barriers and everyone's yelling at the lifeguard to hurry up and take care of the kid to see if he's going to make it, or if he's okay, or what's going on. The lifeguard stopped where the kid was, looked like he was going to be sick, and then the bystanders stop, and the entire park just went completely silent. After a few seconds, though it felt like forever, there was a mad scramble of finding the boy's family, then later closing the park and exiting the crowd, but you could definitely tell which people in the crowd were near the slide when everything happened and which people were in other parts of the park. Probably the single most unnerving thing I've ever experienced. It took a good couple of months before I could talk about it relatively normally. I don't think I'm ever going to want to go on roller coasters or thrill rides like that ever again. And I'm still annoyed about the news helicopter that flew above the park and ducking showed on live TV that pool full of that kid's blood. His ducking family and friends had to see that. At least put the video somewhere on the internet where you have to specifically seek it. I saw a kid get hit by a car and flung into a tree leaving the zoo when I was in kindergarten. 1 minute, everything was fine. A few moments later everyone was running around screaming. Did they die? Sting from the Police and Shaggy were touring a few years ago. Most of the audience was there for Sting. One of the last songs they did was Rocks, and halfway through they switched to Mr. Boombastic. Never seen a crowd turn on an act faster. I was at a Warped Tour in Chicago, circa 2015. Sleeping with Sirens was playing, one of my childhood favorites. The whole crowd was going hard until the set was cut 20 minutes short by some girl who passed out in the middle of the crowd. They cancelled the rest of the set, and I know it may sound bad, but a lot of people were saying negative stuff about the person who couldn't keep themselves hydrated. The next year Sleeping with Sirens set was cut short because of an incoming thunderstorm. I think they were doomed to play in Chicago. Lol. Went to a burlesque show in Florida. This particular group were very well known for a lot of gross out humor and politically charged jokes. I should note this was during the 2016 election cycle. So, the show went on just fine and everyone is laughing and having a good time until they make a joke about candidate Donald Trump. Element of the crowd got ugly. People started throwing abuse. People started threatening violence. One guy started screaming about Bill Clinton being a racist who must die. A few people had to be removed by security. I've never seen a crowd turn so fast on a performer. It was pretty scary for a few minutes. They powered through, and most of the offended parties stormed out. I talked to the leader of the band and asked if it was normal. He said nope, usually a handful of people get offended, but that's what the show is advertised for. A shame they are no longer touring really. So, to recap. Naked women dancing around okay. Naked fat guy with dildo in his mouth singing a song about being cute. That's okay. Naked guy stomping on babies with comedic amount of blood. That's okay. Jokes about religion. Okay. Jokes about Trump. Triggered. When a baseball player hit a home run and the ball hit a kid right in the face. Or when the player hit a home run and a dad tried to reach over the railing to get it and fell to their death. That one video where an esports team wins and that one member says you ducking F\G and everyone stops cheering. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's ducking awesome dude. Thanks for watching.